Dayas are just the latest smash and grab victims in San Francisco, coming just weeks after suspects broke into a car as a driver was getting onto I-80. That video was...
California is a dumpster fire, and sadly, it is a dumpster fire. It's tragic what happened here. Gross mismanagement. We started talking about this with San Francisco, which is a war zone.
We have new details this evening about that smash and grab near Golden Gate Park. We're hearing from the victims who traveled here from Seattle and want their story to be a warning to other tourists and really for locals as well. It's sad to see all these smash and grab robberies that continue to plague San Francisco. NBC Bay Area's Pete Serrato says more.
The Ndayas were just trying to soak in one last bit of vacation in San Francisco on Wednesday before the long drive home back to Seattle. But as they were enjoying family time at Golden Gate Park, things took a turn for the worse. This is video of Jason Ndaya chasing a man trying to get away with his luggage after breaking into their rental car in the middle of the day. You can see he was able to wrestle away the luggage before the thieves sped off. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt.
We do want people to be aware. It's not smart to leave your luggage in the car if you're going to go tourist attraction. So lesson learned on that one.
The Ndayas are just the latest smash and grab victims in San Francisco, coming just weeks after suspects broke into a car as a driver was getting onto I-80. That video was widely viewed. The man who recorded the Golden Gate Park incident lives in the area and also sent me this picture of the robber reaching into the car through the broken window. It's unfortunately a familiar sight in this neighborhood.
We knew it right off the bat because this is actually the second time both my wife and I, personally witnessed something like that happen.
Now, the Seattle couple did call 911, but due to time constraints, couldn't stick around to file a police report. But they tell me they plan to do so in the future. But San Francisco police remind folks to always call 911 in these incidents and to remain as witnesses. In San Francisco.
And now LA, before this, was riddled with crime, people walking in and out of the stores, just stealing stuff. You've documented that forever. It is time for change. Gavin Newsom is a terrible manager. He is the Justin Trudeau of California. He's horrific. And obviously, people should want to make a change and hire somebody else. But I think it goes the other way. I think they're so tired of the rhetoric and the policy and the taxes and the mismanagement. You know, just watching that woman talk about, it's all over the internet now, where is the water pressure in my fire hydrant? To Gavin Newsom, he says, it's a local thing.
We're in the public safety phase.
I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it.
You can't say that when you're a politician. You have to own the problem. He doesn't even understand that. Time for him to get removed from office immediately.
Mel, any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, what can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
I want to be very, very clear. Yes, we took a $17 million budget cut. And as we know, any budget cut would negatively impact our ability to carry out our mission.
Number one, Governor Newsom has blocked the release of desperately needed water from mountain reservoirs to fight the historic Inferno 2. Number two, for over 20 years, Democrats have blocked attempts to upkeep fire mitigation systems and clear brush from critical areas. Number three, insurance companies now confess to pulling the fire policies of hundreds of thousands of homes in the LA area in the last few months. Number four, the Biden administration enacted a no-fly zone over LA, blocking state and local firefighting aircraft from battling the blaze. Why would they do that? Number five, the Palisades, the hardest hit neighborhood, is stated to be the site of the 2028 Olympics. It had already been designated to be transformed into a model smart city. Number six, the new DEI hire fire chief told the national press last year that her main job was enforcing diversity quotas, not fighting fires or providing disaster assistance. She also supported a $17.5 million cut in the fire department's budget. Number seven, Mayor Bass, out of the country on an African cruise or whatever it was, refused to give her sympathies to those displaced by the epic firestorm and ran from the press upon her return. had nothing to say. And number 8, finally, over the last 2 years, the LA City Council has diverted a large portion of the firefighting budget and surplus gear to Ukraine.
I want to also clarify that I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. It's my job as the fire chief of the Los Angeles City Fire Department to make sure that our firefighters have exactly what they need to do their jobs. And that's why I'm talking to you today. The Palisades fire, everybody's seen it. It is absolutely one of the most horrific natural disasters in the history of Los Angeles.
A few moments later, 2,000 years later.
News is, I'm a great grandfather as of today. Granddaughter. That's baby girl, baby boy. So I remember this day for a lot of long.
2,000 years later.
Community didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
One eternity later.
Why is our town burnt down? Why are our families' houses gone? And if you can explain that to us in a logical, reasonable way, we'll accept it. But right now, there is no explanation.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Can you back up? Appreciate it. Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position?
And even with an additional 100 engines, I tell you, we were not going to catch that fire. But with that being said, let me be clear. The $17 million budget cut and the elimination of our civilian positions like our mechanics did and has and will continue to severely impact our ability to repair our apparatus. So,
do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you not?
With that, we have over 100 fire apparatus out of service, and having these apparatus in the proper amount of mechanics would have helped. And so it did absolutely negatively impact. I want to also be clear that I have, over the last 3 years, been clear that the fire department needs help. We can no longer sustain where we are. We do not have enough firefighters. With that, I have also requested multiple budgets, interim budgets, to show how understaffed, under-resourced, and underfunded the LAFD is. So with that, also, we have clear data that shows the LAFD needs more help. We need 62 more fire stations. These reports also show that we've had a 55% increase in overall call volume since 2010. And guess what? We're doing it with less firefighters.
Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Can you back up? Appreciate it.
I was also directed to develop a plan as part of a budget reduction exercise, and that could equate to $48.8 million. And I rang the bell that these additional cuts could be very, very devastating for our ability to provide public safety. That would have resulted to 15 fire stations closing down and potentially the elimination of over 300 firefighters. Again, I want to be clear that I submitted a very large budget that will actually allow our firefighters to do their job.
Check this out. This man is a disgrace. And they're asking for his resignation. A lot of people are just, they're done, man. And again, they've ran everybody out of California.
Do the right thing. This is an emergency. We can do all this dance and we have differences of opinion as it relates to all kinds of issues and values, and and that's fair game.
I would fill up the hydrants myself. But would you do that?
I would do whatever I can.
But you're not.
And stunning incompetence from California's Democrat leaders as 5 devastating wildfires ravage Los Angeles for a 4th day. Officials somehow finding new ways to make the situation worse after a laundry list of blunders. From LA Mayor Karen Bass skipping town to Africa despite knowing her town would burn, to greasy Gavin Newsom faking a phone call with Biden when confronted over why fire hydrants were running out of water. Newsom now calling for an investigation into the water pressure loss. He should also look into this disturbing new report from the LA Times It claims a major Pacific Palisades reservoir was offline and empty when the fires broke out. So the last thing people in LA needed was a false panic. But thousands of their phones started buzzing last night with this emergency evacuation alert. Turns out it was an error and meant for people in a different fire warning zone. Top officials then acting totally clueless on how it happened. And like Kamala, they promised to find out the root causes. Watch.
I want to clarify. This is not human driven. There is no one sitting at a desk right now initiating emergency alerts. As these alerts are being issued, they are not being activated or initiated by a person. We have every technical specialist working to resolve this issue and to find the root cause.
And after that screw up, Gavin Newsom had the gall to people about misinformation.
I ask you, we've got to deal with this misinformation. There were hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation, lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well. And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling.
And if Californians weren't traumatized enough by all this, marauding gangs of scooter looters are taking advantage. One LA resident claims that 100 people on scooters are roaming evacuated areas as they ransack and loot homes. It's got the California National Guard on the ground to crack down. And Los Angeles is issuing a curfew tonight at 6 local time. Kaylee, just when you think it can't get any worse, they're scaring the crap out of people with these emergency evacuation order. What did this thing went off for the entire county?
Yeah, it went off apparently once, and then it was going off again and again for many people, according to reports. And then people don't know who to trust. And at this point, how can you trust the government? I mean, we've learned the modus operandi of Democrats. And what is that? It's divert responsibility and point to shiny objects. And divert responsibility, Gavin Newsom was asked by Anderson Cooper 2 days ago, why are the fire hydrants running dry? He said, ask a local official. Could you imagine DeSantis doing that during a hurricane? No, he stepped in, fixed the Pine Island Bridge in 3 days. Gavin Newsom just points to local officials. Then he puts out a letter just moments ago, and the letter says, I'm demanding answers on the water. You're the leader of California. You are the chief executive. And then he goes on with Biden and talks about misinformation. This blew my mind because I remembered the Washington Post story that came out a week ago. Do you want to know Biden's biggest regret? Not Afghanistan, not inflation, not all of his failures. It's not combating misinformation. It's the same line they used after Hurricane Helene when he sat there with Kamala Harris after their failed response. And he said, misinformation, disinformation. That's the playbook. Say misinformation when the hard truth is this. You may have a playbook. The hard truth, progressive leadership fails during times of crisis. East Palestine, Hurricane Helene, this wildfire.
And now there's scooter looters, Sandra, and to think that they could do anything about that when they have this on their hands, it's ludicrous.
This is crazy. There are people dead, okay? They're displaced. They're distraught.
It's a catastrophe, and there's nothing worse than people who exploit it, except for the scooter looters, because I read that they are just looking for bread because they're hungry. I think it's sad, it's laughable when leaders say, if you loot, you will be arrested. Like the mobs that were raiding department stores. And don't you think looters kind of factor into their life choices the chance of arrest? You know, that's part of the game, especially when the word illegal no longer means anything. What a leader has to say is, if you loot, we will shoot you. We will. And we might come back later to pick you up. But we're in the midst of this catastrophe, one that suspends your usual assumptions about compassion for criminals. Show the criminals that this will not be tolerated. That's how it's done. You know, Kaylee brought this up. In a crisis, Democrats, the modern Democrat seems to be useless because when there is no crisis, they don't prepare for a crisis. Instead, they spend 8 years on silliness. For 8 years, they had their hair on fire about non-existent threats. Trump, climate change, transphobia. And when you have a real fire, when your hair is really on fire, I'm off to Ghana or I'm faking a phone call with the president. And you think about these false alarms. Do you think there'll be any?
Just can't make it up, man. You just can't make it up.
The accountability for that? You can't hold people accountable when everybody's incompetent. There is a crisis of competence in this country. It's not just LA. It's New York City with crime. It's New Orleans with terror. It's San Francisco, Los Angeles.
Yes.
And they all have something in common. They replaced real priorities with phony ones, which is, again, fine in a non-crisis world. You can do that stuff. But when a crisis hit, everybody gets punished because you are an incompetent. When they say it's DEI, when I say it's DEI, let's say I say it's DEI, it's not my fault. I can blame the policy because you put the policy forward. You put it in my head. You boasted about it. You talked about equity and inclusion until you were blue in the face. And now, when incompetence comes into question, after pushing it so openly, it's our fault to have that thought in our head. DEI is credibility Ozempic. When you see an overweight friend and suddenly they lose a ton of weight, do you attribute it to a gym routine or a low-carb diet? No, you go, that person's on Ozempic. Now, you may be wrong, but because Ozempic is everywhere and talked about, you assume it's Ozempic. It's the same with diversity hires. You see an incompetent minority in a leadership position, you think DEI hire because that's what was sold to you. And it's unfair to that leader because that leader...
Truth bombs, man. Facts. Truth. I know people hate to hear it. People hate to hear this, man. But it's the truth.
Leader might actually have the qualifications. They might have done it the hard way. But you don't know that because of DEI. The difference between DEI and Ozempic is at least Ozempic works.
Well said, Greg. And
in your face, Harold!
And those scooter looters better watch out.
Shoot!
Oh, man.